What
today?
do I have for us today? Well, a couple months ago, in June 22nd, Russell Glasser did a show on financial scams.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
I was
but
here.
It was a very good show, and he talked about sort of how financial scams work and that sort of thing. And I had been meaning for a long time to talk about religious financial scams, and it's a very, very, very big topic. You know, I feel like this is part one of 80 billion. I don't think I'm going to hit it every week for the next, rest of my life, but I did want to, bring up this topic. I'm just going to scratch the surface today and have a little fun with it. And in effect, these financial scams are a earthly reason not to believe. So we very often focus on theological stuff and why that's not convincing us, that sort of thing. Well, here's a completely different way of looking at the problem. Look at how religions actually work in the real world and ask yourself, is this an organization that you trust? Given that they're doing these scams, how can you trust this? And how can you trust anything they say? How can you trust them on the big issues if you can't trust them on the little day-to-day issues, right? So
As kind of a preemptive example, there's a little factoid which I'm going to do off the top of my head, so the numbers aren't necessarily completely correct. In that famous December '05, I guess, edition of Mother Jones, that talks about church-state separation, where the Christian life truly. There's a section on charitable donations and who gives what to whom and how much. One of the interesting things is there are websites, if you're interested in giving to a charity, there are websites you can go to that evaluate charities to determine how much of every dollar you donate actually goes towards the cause as opposed to administrative costs, overheads, whatever else. And some of the claims made by some of these organizations, I don't want to flatly claim that anybody's dishonest. They may represent this honestly. But, for example, after the tsunami, Focus on the Family listed a donation of, I don't know how many, maybe it's $2 million or something like that, but included 1 million copies, 1 million copies of one of James Dobson's books. It's something like,
holy moly.
When God does things we don't understand, or something like that. I can't remember the title of the book. Somebody will know. I don't know what the going price was for each of those 1 million copies, but if their total donation was like 2 million, and that included 1 million copies, those books, if they were $1 a piece, that's already half of the donation. So it's a way of kind of like fluffing the numbers and saying, oh, we donated $2 million in charity aid to the tsunami victims.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if the tsunami victims need a book necessarily. Maybe they need some food. Or the title of the show is called Scamlets, and it's a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's a word I made up, and it's not yet a word, but let's make it one. And the definition is a simple, reusable scam that religions use to make money and control people. So I'm going to focus on 5 things today that are used over and over and over again. And once you recognize those things, you'll see them all over. And I think it's good for folks to be aware that these things are there. So, and the common thread of all of these things are that the people that are taken in by the scam are being lazy and allowing others to think on their behalf. And if you do that, if you allow others people to think for you, their agenda is going to be put in the mix, and they don't necessarily have your interests at heart. It's very simple sort of conflict of interest issue. If you're allowing somebody else to think for you, you're in effect giving up some of your control over what you do to them. And very often people have a profit motive in doing this. So religions are based on this idea. They glorify faith, which I consider to be gullibility. I've talked about that. They manufacture and perpetuate ignorance and glorify blind following. And they reap the rewards of this. We have a caller.
I apologize for interrupting. I just want to make a note. I realize that there's one caller, and I know last week we took lots of calls. I want to let Don get through a chunk of this before we actually take calls. Feel free to hang on the line. We'll get to you. You're still first.
Yeah, let me get through maybe 2 of them, and then we'll take some calls, and we'll come back and do the rest.
Sure.
How about that? Okay. So religions, I think, are based on these scamlets. I think that they use them, and it's the basic reason why so many religious leaders are con artists. We have seen that all the time with Ted Haggard and Ken Hovind and Dobson, Kennedy. All these folks are making money through these scams. All the faith healers, for example. This is no shortage of these. So they all make their living selling crap, and they're very good at it. Some are very good at it. So lest you think I'm making this up, let's take some quotes from religious leaders in their own words and see if that bears out. So Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, reason is the devil's greatest whore. By the nature and manner, she is being a noxious whore. She is a prostitute. The devil's appointed whore. You get the whore thing, right? Whore eaten by scab and leprosy, who ought to be trodden underfoot and destroyed, and she in her wisdom. Throw dung on her face and make her ugly. This is all about denigrating reason. She is and ought to be drowned in baptism. She would deserve the wretch to be banished by the filthiest place in the house to the closets. Okay.
There are a number of apologists, I won't name any comfort names, who seem to hold very
Similar
close to Luther, in that while they may not say, spread dung in the face of reason, they sure do spread a lot of dung in the face of reason in their arguments.
Yeah. Well, I think they have to in order to get their point across. Here's one from Tertullian. I believe because it is impossible.
Yeah, I love that.
Thomas Aquinas, belief is the greatest of sin. Unbelief is the greatest of sins. Here's James Dobson. Those who control what young people are taught and what they experience, what they see, hear, think, and believe, will determine the future course for the nation. So those are some religious quotes that kind of confirm what I'm saying. And what do atheists think of this? Well, some of the atheists say things like Richard Dawkins says, faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to avoid the need to think. So everybody's kind of saying the same thing here. Christopher Hitchens, religion is a poison because it asks us to give us our most precious faculty, which is that of reason, and to believe things based on evidence, without evidence. It then asks us to respect this, which it calls faith. And another one, beware of allowing others to interpret reality on your own behalf. Who said that? Me.
I was going to say, I didn't.
Okay, I'm a great atheist. What do you know? What do you know? So today I want to look at 5 different scamlets, and I've given them names. One is called special knowledge or power. One is called stealing credit. One is called future reward. Fourth is codependence, and the last one is sin.